The DARPA Subterranean Challenge virtual competition pushes the limits of autonomy by challenging simulated robots to explore virtual underground worlds. To win, competitors must build software to drive or fly simulated robots through the virtual worlds, gaining points by locating hidden artifacts that represent items that first responders or service members could encounter underground. The worlds are designed with obstacles, constrained passages, vertical elements, and degraded communications. The worlds mimic real tunnels, urban infrastructures, and natural cave networks. Tiles can be used to build new environments. The scale and diversity are limited only by your creativity. The robot teams must navigate through these challenging environments completely autonomously with no human interaction. Competitors build their robot teams by choosing from the platforms and sensors on the SubTech Repo. They can build teams of multiple robots, though they must choose wisely. Each item has a value in SubT credits, and competitors only have 1,000 SubT credits available to build their teams. Virtual competitors then add software to each of their robots to autonomously map, navigate, and search for artifacts in the simulated environment. That's how teams take on the SubT Challenge virtual competition and revolutionize how we operate in the underground domain.
Welcome to DARPA's Subterranean Challenge, the Cave Circuit. I'm your host, Cameron Irwin, and alongside of me, two of the hardest working people in robotics, especially in the last few months. This, of course, is Dr. Timothy Chung, the program manager. He's going to be all the way to my left, and then we have Angela Mayo, who is our virtual competition lead. Now, we got to give you guys a little bit of insight here because what's so fun is we get to dive into the virtual competition of the Cave Circuit. Now, that means 16 teams from all over the world. Well, they're testing their autonomous systems virtually. So Tim, can you tell us a little bit about how we've got here? And this is our third circuit, so what are the others?
Yeah, the DARPA Subterranean Challenge is all about discovering technologies to help us rapidly map, navigate, and search these complex underground environments, and to do so without putting humans in harm's way. One of the key tenets of the SubT challenge is putting these systems in really complex but diverse environments. That includes tunnel-like environments, so we held a tunnel circuit, an urban underground, so we held the urban circuit, and now we're here at the cave circuit. Now, unfortunately, due to the global pandemic, we haven't been able to muster all of our systems competitor teams in one place to be able to do a systems competition, but we're still able to maintain this virtual competition where we can press forward on the technologies in the virtual realm.
Can you speak to the importance and the opportunity to be able to have the virtual competition and showcase it like this? This is pretty cool.
Yeah, the virtual competition gives us a chance to highlight what the value of simulation might be. There are a lot of lessons learned that you can learn from simulation where it might be too costly or dangerous or time consuming to go out and test in the real world. Now, our simulators are set up so that we can accurately represent the underground environments and allow for the insights that we learn in the simulator to translate over to the physical systems as well.
Now, we're talking cave circuit, which means this is some pretty complex networks, right, of caves. So tell me some of the obstacles or some of the challenges these teams are going to have to face, and which ones excite you the most?
Yeah, the thing that excites me a lot about cave networks in particular is the fact that they have so many twists and turns. You never know what's going to be around that next bend, whether it's a drop-off, a big open cavern, what have you. I think that verticality is a key piece of cave networks, and I think we're going to see that here today as well.
Now, even though we're going to be showcasing virtual, we need to check in on our systems teams because even though they were not able to join and have a systems competition at the cave circuit, doesn't mean they weren't working. So here is them taking a look at the cave network. And that's pretty much just our first look at some of the terrain and some of the obstacles that you're going to be able to see and that we've had to kind of simulate in the virtual world. So I'm going to take it over to Angela Mayo, and I got to know, what are some of those critical elements that you felt really needed to be included when creating this?
Yeah, the part of these cave networks is because they're formed naturally, there's a wide variety in scale and shape, topology of these environments, and the terrain that these robots have to encounter. So it's been a lot of fun to try to design these virtual cave worlds to try to test these teams' software. and their ability to explore, map, and navigate these underground environments that vary widely in terrain. And really the difference between virtual and systems is we're able to test these teams coordinating their robots to autonomously do everything. They have to communicate with each other, figure out where to explore the environment, and really take on these cave challenges.
Well, I'm glad that you bring up autonomy, right? Because I think that's one of the things that's really cool about virtual is, as compared to systems. Systems, there's still some, tinkering from teams up in the staging area. But with this, they submit their solutions and it's completely hands-off. That's close to true autonomy, right?
Right, it's complete autonomy. The teams just submit their software solutions. Their software has to map the environment, they have to navigate, they have to find and report artifacts and localize them. They have to coordinate their multi-robot teams, and they have to handle degraded communications, which are modeled in these underground domains in the virtual realm.
Now, when we're talking virtual realm, you've actually built 8 different worlds, and this is where it gets fun. So let's take a look at these 8 worlds, and these are what our 16 teams will have to traverse, and actually each course 3 different times. So you can see, Angela, check these 8 out. I mean, what's so unique about them?
Yeah, you can see a really diverse scale between all of these environments. So we've got anything from 1.5 kilometers of traversable length all the way up to 5.2 kilometers of traversable length for the team to explore. We've got some of these which you can't see as much verticality that we're going to talk about a lot later. And then you've also got various passages that are constrained where the team has to plan through those passages, and we have really large caverns where the teams have to explore and try to search those caverns for really small artifacts.
So while they're looking for artifacts, they're using systems that they've created. Now, Tim, you got to tell me a little bit about the Subtech Repo, because that's where they're going for all their stuff, right?
That's right. The Subtech Repo is where we house a lot of these open source resources to be able to not only create, but also to test the different technologies that we're interested in. So that Subtech Repo houses not only the robot virtual models that we'll be seeing and the teams are using to execute their solutions, but also these 8 competition worlds are also housed in that Subtech Repo. In addition to that, we have 73 different tiles, these Lego bricks of cave elements that you can mix and match to go and build your own cave world to test your solutions in as well.
So this is available even to the viewer at home. They can go find this, right?
Yeah, they sure can.
Awesome, super fantastic. So 17 different robot platforms able to be used and 58 possible configurations, and I'm sure we'll get into those configurations as we go through the competition. But you're probably wondering, how in the world does the competition work? What's the scoring like? Here you go.
Here's how to win an event in the DARPA Subterranean Challenge. Find the most artifacts in the shortest amount of time. When, or if, a team's system locates an artifact, it has to report not only the type of artifact, but also its spatially referenced location to an accuracy within 5 meters. A valid report earns 1 point, but teams are granted only a limited number of reports, so they can't just guess until they get lucky. Sound easy enough? Think again.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite that easy at all, but let's take a look at some of the artifacts that they will be searching for. Here you go. Here's a look at 3 common artifacts found at every circuit stop. The first being a survivor, that's represented by a mannequin, and then you have a cell phone and a backpack, and then unique to cave, you also have cave artifacts, a rope and a helmet. Sounds about right. You got a climber in there potentially needing some help. Now, I also think it's really important to note, and I mentioned it just previously, that we have 8 worlds, but each of our teams will have their solutions run 3 times on each of the worlds. Combination of those 3 runs will ultimately lead to their score or team total. Who are the teams? Well, here are the 16 teams from around the world, and Angela, give us a little breakdown because we've got some new teams.
Right, we have 8 teams returning from the previous 2 circuits, and then we've doubled the number of competitors for this circuit. That includes 5 teams who are completely new to the SubT challenge, as well as 3 teams who were competing in the systems competition for previous circuits, and now they're also competing in the virtual competition.
And with the addition of new teams, Tim, I'm sure that has to excite you, right?
Absolutely does. This is phenomenal to see that technology insights could arise from anywhere and from all parties out there interested in advancing the state of autonomy research.
All right, I think, have we pretty much summed up the competition? Are we ready to get started?
Let's do
Should
this.
we meet our first world? All right, time for World 1. This is Glyph. We've named them all for you too. There's 8 of them, but we like to, get a little creative here. Now, there are some fun facts. You can start to see the obstacles pop up in the artifacts, but what's a dynamic obstacle, Angela?
Yeah, so a dynamic obstacle means that the world actually changes while the robot passes through it. In this case, we have rocks dropping from the ceiling to either block a path where a UGV can no longer go after those rocks fall down, or to create local obstacles where a UGV has to navigate around them.
Well, we'll get into that a little bit deeper too, and some of the unique elements of Glyph for sure as we get into some of these events. But I think we need to start showing you guys how this is going to function. We're in the virtual world, so with that, we get to play back time, we get to fast forward, and we are actually going to play back these 16 simulations from each team's best run on World 1 all at the same time. When something of interest comes up that we've noted, all of a sudden we're gonna pull you guys in closer, just like that, perfectly timed. The box is gonna circle, and all of a sudden, Team Barks is up first. So let's check out Team Barks. And this is your first look at some of the terrain you'll see in the virtual world. This is what's called the staging area, where the systems start. This UGV is going to circle all the way around, and I know there's a lot on screen. We're going to break this down for you. So to start off, the team name will be located up in the corner. Active robots, that's how many are on course at any given time, will be located right beneath. Then you've got your score and total attempts for artifact reports. And then lastly, on this side, you're going to have current speed, and that's going to be in meters per second. And then Angela, what you got on your side?
Yeah, so we have the time remaining in the scored run, and that'll start counting down from 60 minutes once the first robot enters the course. We also have the distance from the robot we're following to the nearest artifact on the course. And down in this corner, we have a zoomed in mini map of this location of the course where we're following. So we'll see the robot locations, any other robots that are on course nearby, as well as the artifact locations in blue and dynamic obstacle locations in orange.
All right, it's time to get back to the run. All right, we already mentioned it. One UGV, I believe, has already made their way past the starting point. That's why that countdown clock is starting to tick down. So 60 total minutes to be able to find all those artifacts. And you're going to have 40 total attempts to be able to not only identify not only locate, but also identify those artifacts throughout the course. Got to be identified within or located within 5 meters of accuracy. So Angela, what are you seeing right away on this first event?
Yeah, first we're seeing Barks deploying both of their UGVs first to try to start mapping the environment and deploying a communications network. So what we saw right there was a communications breadcrumb being dropped by Barks, and that's actually able to extend their communication range as they go through the course. So their UAVs that follow up behind them will be able to use that communication network that they just laid out to relay artifacts and map information back to the other robots.
So now, Tim, is there a different strategy or different methods used to be able to drop these breadcrumbs around?
Yeah, it's all about the austerity, the difficulty of communicating in these underground environments, and radio frequencies just don't seem to get very far. You can't, in fact, in these environments, you wouldn't be able to speak really much around the first bend of the corner.
Well, and that speaks to the tiles. So tell me a little bit about tiles. You called them the building blocks, Legos, and that's what builds up these, but they kind of represent what would happen in the real world.
Yeah, the different structures that we are interested in, whether it's verticality, whether it's steep inclines, whether it's rough terrain or constrained passages, we've constructed those into building blocks, these tiles that we call them. We have 73 of them in that Subtech Repo. So again, being able to build your own worlds means that you can test the features of your solutions that you're most interested in.
Closest to the reality, and there you go with Team Barks working its way back and around. So let's take a little bit of a deeper look at Team Barks. This is a team that is led by Sarah Kitchen. They are out of the United States, 6 total members, and this is the fun part. We're going to show you these images throughout the competition. It's going to show you the roster at the bottom. So that's the total number of systems that these teams are using. You can see the UGVs and the aerial vehicles. Next up, it looks like it's time to move on to Team Marble. And I love this. You can start to see the systems slowly making their way. So pay attention to that orange, just that little bit of orange through the staging area. When this gets highlighted, that big area is actually the staging area, not to be confused with a cavern. And Angela, I believe this is a different type of UGV. We have yet to see this.
Yeah, this is their Husky robot that's actually modeled after the team's robot that they've competed with in the systems competition. They brought this to the urban circuit. And you see on top of this robot a payload that rotates around, so that camera is searching for artifacts all around it as they're traveling through the environment.
So you talk about how it's searching, and it's not just about searching high ground, it's searching low ground. So are there some differences in some of these vehicles where maybe it's better suited for one than the other?
Well, I think this is where having a diverse team actually plays to your strengths. You don't need to have one robot that necessarily needs to look everywhere. In this particular case, we see this Husky, as it's searching around, has the advantage of looking in ways that even if it's not in the line of direction that it's moving.
Well, and this is perfectly timed up. There is a look at your survivor artifact. So you can see him down in the lower right-hand corner. And in fact, this team Marble was able to not only locate, but also identify. They used up one of those attempts and they put a big #1 on the board. They've got a score. And just as a reminder, check out that lower right-hand mini map in the corner. This is a great image to show you what systems are on course, where they're at. And again, those little blue dots throughout are actually the artifacts you can start to see as these systems get closer and closer. And Team Marble out of the United States, 11 total team members. They are led by Dan Riley. They're out of the University of Colorado, Boulder. What makes this team unique? Because I see something. What do you see?
Yeah, they're using all UGVs, which is an interesting choice for the cave environment. For this world, I'd expect them to do pretty well since the entire world is traversable by UGVs. It just has some inclines and declines. But they actually have experience with laying out a communications network, so I would expect them to do well in this world.
Well, I'm glad that you bring up those comm networks. Let's see what Sodium-24 Robotics has in terms of communications, as they are about 4 minutes into their run as well. They already have 5 active robots just within 4 minutes. Is there some strategy there? Is it, delay one at a time or just send them all out at once?
I think this team is sending them all out at once, and it looks like their UAV goes out first and actually causes that rock fall to drop down, that huge rock fall that actually blocks the entire path for later UGVs. So they might have benefited from sending out their UGVs first, which could have gone past that rock fall before it dropped. And then their UAV also could have recognized that this global rockfall blocked the path and passed back information to their UGVs to find a different path, but we'll have to see if their UGVs approach that rockfall.
I mean, and this is one of the many elements you guys were talking about. It's not just about, what's already there for this cave terrain. It's constantly changing. So these rock falls are kind of shaping the map, changing the map. And these systems are sending back and forth information amongst one another. So we'll see if this UGV can turn around, find a different path. Angela, the fun part about this, you're a little bit all-knowing. We're gonna call you all-knowing throughout this competition because you've seen just about every run, every inch of these competitions and these solutions for these teams. So you think this one's gonna be able to find a different path?
Yeah, I think this robot will be able to find a different path. I've looked ahead a little bit, and we see their X2 robot actually able to travel 2.8 kilometers through this environment. So they're really using the speed of this X2 robot, which is faster than the X1 that we saw in Bark's solution, to traverse more terrain in a shorter amount of time.
Fantastic. 5 active robots. Let's take a look at Sodium-24 Robotics. They are led by Malcolm Stagg and He's leading himself because he is a one-man team. He's been focusing on his comms network and information sharing prior to heading to the cave circuit. He has competed at each of the virtual competition's circuit stops. And back to our dashboard. Still on World 1 Glyph Team Robotica, and there's the orange. You're starting to see them. They went left and right at that first decision making. Angela, what system is this? Because I have yet to see this one.
Yeah, this is Robotica's Freya UGV, which they've actually designed after a real robot that they use. It's a custom robot that actually has cameras and LiDAR sensors pointing both front and back, so they're able to see all around them. They actually have 4 HD cameras as well. And you just saw a backpack in the upper corner, which I think their UGV can actually see using those surround cameras.
So were they able to score it? That's the real question. Are we not sure yet?
Yeah, they are actually able to score that artifact.
Fantastic.
And there it is.
Oh, perfect. See, I told you guys, she's all knowing. She knows everything. She has the foresight as that Freya vehicle drops off yet another comm network, or excuse me, breadcrumb for their comm network. They've got 7 attempts. You can see now the newest distance from artifact. They've got about 32 meters to go. And this team, Tim, uses a technique that's called wall finding. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so this wall following is similar to how you might walk in a hallway late at night at dark. You put your hand out and you ride along the wall. And what they've done here for their solutions is selected left wall follow or right wall follow in some cases, go deep or explore nearby. And I think that difference in behavior speaks to some of the advantages, again, of different solutions.
We'll have to keep a track. Whether they pick right or left, that's the real question. See if they can get those systems spread out throughout this cave network. Let's take a look at Team Robotica. There's Freya, like we mentioned, they've got 3 of those systems, and then they're using 5 X4s, one of the most used systems throughout the competition. This team is led by Martin DeLuey. They've got 7 members from Czech Republic, United States, and Switzerland. It's quite an international team. They actually took 3rd place at the virtual competition at Ergum as well. And who's knocking on the door? Well, it's Lizard and Dragonfly Robotics. I think they've gone a little bit to the right and left as well, maybe one system down that right tunnel. 3 attempts, a score of 1. We are about 10 minutes in. Let's see what's going to take place here. I believe that's a UAV coming down what looks to be a pretty steep incline.
Yeah, so this UAV likes to maintain a fixed height above the ground, and so as it's descending, it's trying to maintain that altitude, and that makes it a little bit, more resilient to any terrain that they might encounter.
And speaking of terrain they might encounter, well, a rock fall. So do they adjust accordingly? If that rock fall, does it recognize that in real time?
Yeah, they should adjust their height to correspond to that rock fall, but it looks like they've passed it with their UAV. Their 2 UGVs that are coming behind it will not be able to pass through this area now, so they'll have to find a different way around.
Well, that will be something to look out for. They've got 4 active robots on course. They've got some work to do as they're 53 meters away from the next artifact. So let's meet Lizard and Dragonfly Robotics. We already mentioned their area vehicles. They have 2 of them and 2 X1 UGVs. They've got a couple teams. They're out of the United States, but they have team members from Sri Lanka as well. And their team lead is Nishantha Randuni. And they said they've done a really solid job trying to figure out simple solutions. So looking at a grand problem and then simplifying it down into sub-problems. Next up, CTU Crass Snorlab. UAV traveling at pretty much the height of the cavern. Is that something they have to take into account as well, Angela?
Yeah, it looks like they're choosing to travel along the ceiling of the environment, which might give them a little more view of the artifacts that are located either up on these ledges or located hanging on the walls. So that's a strategy that can maybe give them more view of the artifacts.
So we talk about edges of environment, whether it's, the ceiling. I mean, can you explain the expanse of this environment? How big is this one?
Yeah, this one is a few kilometers, and CTU has actually deployed this UAV pretty deep into the environment. They're definitely out of communications range here, so they see that backpack and they're not able to report it back right now. CTU actually has a strategy where they save up all of their artifacts till the end anyway and try to report the ones that they have the highest confidence in. But their UAV is out of communication range, so it will have to travel all the way back towards the staging area where hopefully they've laid out a communications network with their breadcrumbs. But I have looked ahead and it looks like they will later report this backpack artifact, but it will not score. It has 16 meters of error, so they might have had a mapping drift here that caused their error to be off.
You described that so perfectly. So that's the reason we're not able to see, a point scored right away when they see that backpack, but later on. Great job. Here's a look at CTU Krasnor Lab. We've got several different systems, actually 3 different systems, 2 different aerials. What's the difference between the 2?
Yeah, one is the X4, which is definitely used by a lot of teams in this circuit. The other one is the DS1. The DS1 is modeled off after a Team Explorer in the systems competitions UAV and is in the Subtech Repo.
And Ergum is already knocking on the door. Now, I don't want it to get lost. C2 Krasnor Lab is led by Carl Zimmerman and Thomas Svoboda. Now, here is Ergum with a tracked UGV. And I believe they have just one system in the competition. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. They've brought they've selected this vehicle, the HD2. It's a robot modeled after Team Marble's design. And here you see that similar payload where it's slewing back and forth, trying to get a larger field of view as it's searching around as it traverses this terrain.
So how's the traction with this vehicle?
Yeah, it's a bit better than some of the X1 four-wheeled platforms. We've modeled in the simulator these tracked platforms with multiple wheels rather than an actual track, so it's still a bit different from what a real-life tracked platform would be like in terms of friction.
Oh, and perfectly timed. There is a artifact identified, a backpack on that right side of your screen, so now they are up to 2 points. They've used 10 of their attempts of their 40, and now they're got to get up a little bit of a steep incline. Find a different area. So let's take a look at Team Ergum. Ergum is led by Andres Pogar, and this is actually their first event. Mm-hmm. So, how much work goes into being able to, be a part of an event like this for a team that maybe is new?
Yeah, well, we've tried to make it such that we are able to welcome any of these people. We have a number of resources available, from Hello World examples and tutorials, to get these new competitors underway.
Fantastic. And next up is Coordinated Robotics. Now, this is a team that isn't new. We've seen them a few times throughout our circuit stops. And there's one of those HD2s, but that one would look like it was doing a little bit of a 360, but maybe not on the right edge. And there is a UAV, which I believe is different, Angela.
Yeah, this is the X3 UAV, which has a smaller payload, so it's not able to carry the 2D and 3D LiDAR systems that we see on other UAVs. This one only has an RGB depth camera, which they can still use for mapping, but it has a little bit less field of view.
So you'll have to keep track of this system. The X3B is what Team Coordinated Robotics is calling it. They've just had an artifact identified, so they've used 9 attempts. They've got a pretty high score right now, 6 points scored, and as a reminder, they only have 23 minutes left in the 60-minute scored run. They'll have to try and pick up a few more points.
Yeah, looking ahead, it looks like their X3 is able to travel 2.2 kilometers into the environment, passing 13 artifacts, but they're only able to identify 6 of them. So I think that limited field of view is actually hurting in this case because they can't see entirely around them as they're passing through.
I was just about to ask you why you thought that might be happening, but you already teed it up as this X3 finds a bit of a wall. So let's meet Team Coordinated Robotics. Coordinated Robotics, they're using the HD2s. They have 4 of those systems, and they have 5 X3s. The most you can have of any one system is 5. This team is led, and pretty much by himself, yet again, Kevin Knadler out of the United States. They have done a really solid job through virtual in the first 2 circuit stops. And now that brings us to the conclusion of our coverage, at least for World 1. Here is a look at your leaderboard. Now, as a reminder, team's total score is made up of 3 of their series of runs on each world. So that's why you're seeing the best run highlighted. We just want to let you know which one that you are seeing images from. And then also there's the run 2 and run 3, the total all the way on the right side of your screen. So here's the second half and where we sit after World 1. And I believe, yep, a couple teams are going to be looking for their first point in World 2. Which brings me perfectly. It's time to get into World 2. Now, because we don't have necessarily 8 hours to go through all of these 8 worlds, we're going to give you some hyperspeed. Again, virtual world, we got all the power. So here's a look at World 2. It is called 5 Fingers. Angela, give me a breakdown of this world.
Yeah, this world has a dense network of intersections that teams will have to make a lot of decisions on which path they want to take. And this will be an area where multi-robot teams can kind of coordinate and try to perform loop closures to get their mapping accuracy better. And another fun fact about this world, it was actually generated using a procedural cave world generation script, which is also on the Subtech Repo. So you can just run that script and create random worlds like this.
Man, that's gotta be so fun. Sit at home and find all these robots, put them together and see what you can create on your own. Now let's take a look at where we stand after World 2, because that's the big question, you know, how did these teams perform? You gave us some insight, but let's take a look at the leaderboard following World 2 and what happened in World 2. Here's a look. So 38 total points, that's a lot of points for Team Dynamo just in this world alone. Then Barks is following up shortly after 36 total points, Coordinated Robotics 35. Angela, you got anything to add?
Yeah, the top 8 teams here are all using more than 4 robots to try to divide and conquer this really complex path. Dynamo is one of our new teams, and it sounds like they're doing really well with their solution that tries to actually find these decision points and steers towards those intersections where they can try to make more decisions to spread out their robots.
Well, and here's a look at your second half. Great call on Team Dynamo. As you see, Anderson's at that 9 spot a couple. We've got a pretty solid tie down at 12th place. So here is how it now shapes up. We're going to move you forward. If you add up the worlds, here's a look. Barks, Coordinated Robotics, Dynamo, and beautiful graphics that watch for those numbers. Those are going to tell you the difference in positions for these teams. So if it's a +4, it's moved up 4 positions in the rank. If it's negative, well, you do the math. It's going the opposite direction. So you can see World 1 and World 2 now being added. And the next world we're going to get to, which is World 3, well, we got to get through it a little bit quick too. So here is a look at, aptly named, Fork in the Road. Angela, break it down.
Right, there's 2 main paths here. The left path is a really long path which will challenge teams to explore deep, and the right path has kind of more constrained loops where teams can do loop closure and kind of deploy their breadcrumbs to extend their communication range. One thing I'll be looking for is in the left path, there's a vertical shaft in there, so they're not able to actually deploy their UGVs down that path and extend their communication range. So they'll really have to employ some risk to send their UAVs, which only have 20 minutes of battery life, deep down that corridor to explore all the way down to those really far artifacts and all the way back to try to report them.
So that speaks really to the diversity, right? You got to be able to have different platforms. You got to be able to set up those comm networks. So now let's take a look at how we've shaped up after World 3. And in World 3, more specifically, Coordinated Robotics 23, 18 for Dynamo. Some of the other ones that stick out, nice job by CTU Krasnor Lab coming up with a total of 9. And then Angela, what else happened?
Right, so as I said, that left branch really requires deep exploration. Coordinated Robotics was able to travel all the way out to 460 meters from the staging area with their X3 UAV and score a phone within 2.5 meters of error. Meanwhile, Dynamo and C2 across NORLAB were actually able to travel further with their UAVs out to 550 meters, but it seems like they may not have been able to make it back to the staging area to report artifacts that they found there.
Oh, bummer. So they were able to find some. They went a long way, weren't able to report. And here is a look at our circuit leaderboard. So this again is after World 3. Now we've combined World 1, 2, and 3. Not too much movement at the top besides Dynamo just dropping 1. C2 across NORLAB stays steady. And in the second half, let's see what ends up happening. Do you guys do the math? Flying Fitches drops 1. Team Uno, I know we got to introduce you to those guys just shortly, but they've got some solid teams competing. 16 of them actually, which is so fun. So now it's time to dive back in. We're gonna get a little nitty gritty. We're gonna head to, I think, what's my personal favorite world just because the name is just so fantastic. T-Rex Handstand. I mean, what is so challenging about this course?
The story of this world is really verticality and 3D exploration. So only 20% of this course is accessible to UGVs. The rest will really need to the teams will really need to use their UAVs to explore these vertical shafts.
And Tim, as we get ready to head into this dashboard, what are some of the things you're excited to see in this world?
Well, as Angela mentioned, this is one that's really going to challenge the teams and encourage them to use that verticality to their advantage. There's not a whole lot of lighting in this world, so making sure that they're looking and searching for these artifacts while trying to speedily fly through them, I think is going to be the key here.
Great call. Well, let's get right into it. Let's take a look at our dashboard. T-Rex Handstand. And if you guys look at the actual map, it really does look like a T-Rex doing a handstand. So let's see who's up first. Again, all of these simulations are being played back at the same time. So we have the ability to go back and forth. We're going to show you some highlights. Here is a team called NUS Sets. Starting off is their Husky vehicle. What do we need to know about them?
This is actually the same Husky that we saw earlier that's modeled off of Marble's platform. And it's a little interesting. They're using the pan tilt payload on top to tilt the camera up and down to search for artifacts rather than rotating it 360 degrees around as Marble did.
And I guess the next question is, if we're going to compare some differences, is there one that you would say is maybe more effective or yeah, we'll go with more effective.
Well, I mean, I think part of this is what their algorithms are interested in. If they're really looking to capture those artifacts up high, or trying to capture and detect where there are negative obstacles, drop-offs down low, then maybe pitching up and down is a good approach.
Well, there is a big point for NUS Sets. They were looking for their first point in competition, and they just picked it up with that backpack on the right side of your screen. And again, check out where they're headed using that map on the lower right-hand corner. They've got about they're getting away from an artifact. So that's why you're seeing that artifact distance start to increase as it is now behind it. They've already used 14 reports just within 14 minutes. A little intriguing, something to follow. Let's meet NUS Sets. And here's a look. They are led by Arjo Chakraborty, and one of the fun things, Tim, is this team is actually made up of primarily students.
Yeah, and these are a team of undergrads at that university.
So fun. You can see their 2 Husky vehicles. They also use a QAV 500. Is this the only team that uses that system?
Yes, it is actually. This is another robot that was designed by Team Marble, but it's a UAV, and it's a really small UAV, so it's able to go quickly through the environment.
And talking about going quickly, here we go. Cynet.ai. They're next up. I think they've got a few X4s, and Tim, I believe this is a team that's gone very heavily with the aerial, so they're also not using a base station. How does that function?
Yeah, that's right. So this team actually is employing that one X4 that you see right there and not using that base station. So that means that all of the computation and all of the reporting has to happen from that one platform.
Wow, so they got to be able to send that back somehow, or they got to come back, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, another thing to consider is they're traveling the same path that NUSCEDS did with their UAV, and they're able to actually explore it more quickly with that UAV, but they're unable to lay out a communications network along the way since that UAV doesn't have the 12 breadcrumbs that NUSCEDS had advantage of.
Well, they were able to just detect one there, that backpack on the lower right-hand corner. Great call by saying same as NUSCEDS. And what type of area in the cave would you call this? Like, what type of terrain would you say they're traveling through right now?
This is a bit of an incline, but we'll see a bit of steeper inclines as we go further into the course. Right now, they're still in a UGV accessible area, so we'll have to see how teams handle the verticality deeper in.
Well, getting deeper in, let's take a look at Scinet.ai. Tim mentioned that they actually only have one system in the competition. It is that X4. They are led by Chris Fataka. And yeah, he's done a really solid job trying to put this together. And it says they're looking for artifacts as quickly as they possibly can, trying to use, he talked about the low light setting and having to find some headlights to be able to find those artifacts beneath. Out of the United States, just 3 members on their team. Columbia, they're chiming in. Looks like they've gone pretty much straight. They have maybe a system that branched off to the right side. Just 7 minutes in to artifact reports having been sent. Let's see what's going to take place. It looks like this is getting narrower and narrower for the UAV. Trying to stay in the middle. Angela, what should we be looking for?
Yeah, we're approaching a steep decline here, so we'll have to see if they can identify the artifact that's at the top of that decline. We'll also see an obstacle noted there, so we'll see some rocks maybe falling down on them. So hang on in just a second.
And that's great. If she has the foresight, but so can you. And remember, you can see where those rock falls are going to take place. They're on the mini map as well. So let's see if we're going to get close to one. There's a steep decline. That would be probably a little tough for some UGVs to get down. And there it is. Makes an adjustment. And now we're going to find the top.
Their downward point lidars on this X4 vehicle are able to detect that the area underneath them has changed, so they're raising their altitude to correspond to that. And it looks like they're trying to explore this deep decline.
See what they can do next. They've got 6 active robots, still have yet to be able to identify and locate an artifact, or at least have it reported for that fact.
Yeah, they passed, you could barely see, but they did pass a rope and a backpack earlier in this video, and the rope they do not score. They actually are 6 meters away, so almost.
Oh, so close.
And then the backpack they are able to score later in the run.
Angela giving us all the insight. This is Team Columbia, led by Neil Johnson. They've got 6 team members. They said they've really focused in with autonomy. They've worked in environments where GPS has been denied, so they felt pretty comfortable heading into this as Team Robotica is coming in. Looks like they've worked their way pretty much through that first straightaway, and a couple maybe traveled off to the right side. I mean, what's the length of this, Angela? What's the depth here?
Yeah, the team has actually explored down that decline that we just saw Columbia in, and they're entering this lava tube-like area where they're descending with their UAV. They're going down to negative 170 meters from the staging area.
Wow!
Yeah, and they're able to explore this pretty deeply into the environment.
And Tim, I know so much research goes into putting on, especially the DARPA Subterranean Challenge, but it's not just the virtual, it's also systems. So can you speak to the number of man hours to be able to build this beautiful virtual world for everybody, and also the system competition for you guys to research these environments?
Yeah, one of the main things that we're deeply interested in is representing these environments and capturing the most important pieces of it to help drive the technology. So whether it's climbing through caves or speaking with cave rescuers and other stakeholders, that's countless hours of really trying to get at the key nuggets that will drive the research.
Well, it looks like you guys have done a phenomenal job, because this looks just about as realistic as I could ever imagine. So this UAV is going to continue its trek. They've got 4 points scored, 11 total attempts used, traveling at 1 meter per second. I mean, how fast can some of those go, Angela?
This UAV can go up to 4 meters per second, so they're not quite using the full speed of this UAV. They might be a little more careful since they're doing right wall following, and the wall is really irregular, so they can't go full speed. Otherwise, they'd likely end up running into that wall.
And this, I believe this system has been used maybe over 30 times total in the competition by multiple different teams, so very utilized. And Team Uno is going to cut us off because they want to say, let's see where they're at. It doesn't look like they've gotten too deep in, just 8 minutes, but whoa, I feel like I haven't seen this system before.
Yeah, this is the DS-1 that we mentioned earlier, modeled after Team Explorer's UAV that they've used in the systems competition. It actually can be deployed off of the back of their UGV in a marsupial configuration. We haven't seen any teams use marsupials in this circuit, but I look forward to seeing them use them in the final event, because really, especially in this world where there's these really long passages with steep inclines and declines afterwards, teams could have deployed their marsupial UAVs deeper into the environment to really maximize that battery life.
One of the things that just stands out to me visually, you know, I'm looking at this quadcopter and I see that there are bumpers around some of the rotors. Now in the virtual world, does that play any effect? Because I feel like maybe in the systems competition, it actually does have some say.
So we are actually trying to capture things like collision, so rollovers, flipping over, downed UAVs. That happens even in the virtual setting as well.
Okay, gotcha. So those bumpers still play a factor. See how it's going, still going about 1 meter per second. They have yet to send in any artifact reports, and you can see there's a bit of a straightaway right as soon as you get out of that staging area. You can see that's the larger area on that mini map on the lower right hand side. And they're going to keep going. Let's meet Team Uno. And right as soon as we were flipping the graphic, oh man, they got that artifact identified. So just so you know, they did get that point. So here's the DS-1. They do have just the one system, no base. This team is led by Vinayak Kankanwadi. They're out of Australia, and it's just a 3-person team. One fun fact about them, I love this. Listening to their interviews, he said his inspiration to get into this was because he wanted to build a flying car. But instead, he said, we probably should just start with mapping and navigation. Start small, dream big, right? Yeah. Here's Team Dynamo. They've gone straight, and actually they've gone up that right corridor. I'm curious, has anyone, I'm going to call it the head of the T-Rex, was anybody able to get kind of into that area?
No, unfortunately, a lot of teams were struggling with these vertical inclines and declines that we're seeing here. Dynamo and Coordinated Robotics are some of the ones able to try to traverse this incline, but only Coordinated Robotics is able to make it to the top of that incline and score an artifact up there, which is 90 meters in altitude.
Whoa, that's up there. And here's a look at, again, Team Dynamo. They've got 5 points scored, and you can start to see the path narrowing and them being able to just continue to traverse down a steep incline. They've used 8 total attempts. I mean, would a UGV be able to get down this?
No, they would not be able to get up or down this. So it's really critical to use UAVs in this case. I think the UAVs are still struggling a bit to identify those 3D frontiers. The UAV that you see here has a 3D LiDAR on board with only plus or minus 15 degrees of vertical field of view. So it might actually be mapping and not recognizing that this is a vertical space to explore. It might be seeing it as kind of a dead end where we see more of this variation in the ceiling.
That's a great call. I'm visually seeing that now, trying to imagine myself there as they try and climb it back out. They've got 3 active robots on course. You can start to see a couple of them down on the right-hand corner. And at one point or another, I believe some UAVs, they passed each other. So can you talk about sharing information, how these systems share information back and forth?
Yeah, Dynamo's solution is definitely sharing mapping information across their 5 UAV platforms, which really helps them to explore the vertical space and kind of spread out without exploring the same space with all of their robots. We did see the UAVs passing each other, but it looks like that's because they're having trouble exploring that vertical space, so they're sending more robots there to try to explore.
Got it. And again, this is Team Dynamo. They are led by Hilario Tomei. He's just a one-man team. We're moving on to coordinated robotics, though. T-Rex, Handstand. Again, this is World 4. There are 8 of them, as a reminder, so we've got some work still to do. Let's take a look at where coordinated robotics is at this point in their run. It looks like we've got a light source coming up. Is it on the ground or is it in the air?
This is an HD2 UGV coming up, and you can actually see it illuminate another HD2 that seems to be stuck there. Oh, and it deploys some rocks in front of it. So this is a different type of obstacle that we haven't seen before. This we're calling the local obstacle, since it's really a challenge for a team's local planning algorithms. This team uses a local height map to try to plan around these obstacles, and it looks like their HD2, the second HD2, is able to plan a path through that.
And so as they're trying to plan a path through, I mean, Tim, what would be interesting to me is, from the systems competition perspective, are these the exact same types of algorithms and code being used to identify up like that, for instance, another rock fall and redirect? And how does that play back in?
Yeah, so I think many of these teams are trying to, if they're able to, use the code that they used in the systems course and bring it here into the virtual course. Coordinated robotics historically hasn't been able to do that, and it's something that they've been working towards.
That's a great call. So coordinated robotics, it's been really interesting. They actually have used the HD2s and the X3s, some models that maybe not a ton of teams have utilized as much in this circuit and in this virtual competition. So let's take a look at what we've got, because I know they're going to keep working through. Here's the HD2. We've mentioned it a couple times, and it looks like they can also drop off 12 of those breadcrumbs. So endurance is up there. Tell me a little bit more. What am I not seeing, guys?
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about this HD2 platform, as well as Marble's Husky platform that they've designed, is it has a downward tilted camera, which is actually made for identifying difficult terrain. So that might have helped coordinated robotics in this case for their local planning around those obstacles.
Team Barks. And already I can tell you, Angela, this is something that sticks out a little bit different to me in my eye. I feel like this UAV is going back and forth, left to right, left to right. So what's happening?
Right, the Barks solution tries to yaw back and forth with their UAV to try to cover more area with those camera sensors. Since this only has a camera pointed forwards, you actually have to incorporate into your motion planning the idea that you need to search for artifacts and you need to go back and forth. And it looks like, based on the size of the environment that they're in, they're yawing back and forth more to see more of the environment around them.
And Tim, can you speak to Team Barks' ability? I feel like they're just so heavy in the math and their different strategies. So can you speak a little bit to some of the things they may be using at Team Barks?
Yeah, one of the ways of thinking about this problem is trying to figure out the navigable space by filling the space with spheres, bubbles that they can reach where it's collision free. And they're trying to pack all of those, fill the caverns that way. And by able to doing that, they'll have a better sense of where they can and can't go, and that's allowing them to solve the problem of navigating more safely.
And I think they called those, what were those areas? Something about blacklist areas of danger. So as they're getting into those areas, they're telling the rest of their systems, hey, this is not safe for you to go. Is that how it works? Yeah, awesome. All right, well, they've got 6 scored, 22 total attempts, and about 16 minutes left in this run. But they're going to have to keep planning because they've got a little ways to go still in that run. So here is a look at the leaderboard that we've now finished up just for this world alone. Here's Robotica up at the top, 20 total coordinated robotics. Well, they had a pretty solid one, 17 total points for them. Barks at 17 as well. What else?
Yeah, Robotica and coordinated robotics definitely were able to explore the deepest through those vertical shafts. Robotica explored down to negative 170 meters, as we mentioned, and coordinated robotics chose that left path and went up to 90 meters up and scored a rope all the way at the top of that vertical shaft.
Fantastic. So you're starting to see the second half of the leaderboard. Again, this is just for world number 4. So let's now take a look at how those get added into our cave circuit leaderboard. This is total team points. Barks up at the tops. They've maintained their position. Coordinated robotics right behind them. Dynamo just beneath. Robotica earned their way up the ranks just a tiny bit. And the second half looks like Cynet is still trying to get up there. Couple ties. But guys, that's just the first 4 worlds. We've got 4 more to go. All right, it's time for the second half of our show of DARPA Subterranean Challenge, the Cave Circuit. Again, I'm Cameron Irwin alongside Dr. Timothy Chung, the program manager and virtual team lead for the virtual competition, Angela Mayo. Now guys, it's time to check in. What are some of the things you've come to realize after the first half?
Yeah, I'm really excited about how teams are exploring these cave networks, and they're really able to disperse their multi-robot teams to explore the spaces efficiently, even through some of these really constrained passages and cavernous areas. And I've also been surprised about some of our new competitors are doing really well.
And I guess that leads me over to Tim. What have you noticed?
Yeah, same thing. I think starting to see not just how they've decided to compose their teams, but also how they're employing their teams. How are they sending their teams of robots in to conquer these underground spaces? Very interesting insights there too.
We'll have to kind of break down some of those strategies as we get into the second half. Now, one of the really interesting points about this entire aspect is that you guys can join in on the conversation. So please join us at #SubTChallenge. We would love to hear from you. And now we can even take this a step further. This is the best part. So we can tinker with all of these robots, the tiles, the configurations. Where do you find those things? Well, let's take a look at our worlds, and you'll also be able to see exactly where you can find them. Right there in the graphic, you can see www.subtchallenge.world. So if you want to take part and try and play with some of these systems, that's where you need to head. Now, one of the fun parts of this too is there's such an infrastructure. There's a huge backbone behind the virtual competition. It's called CloudSim.
DARPA's Subterranean Challenge virtual competition allows teams around the world to compete and explore in the simulated underground world using a cloud-based environment called CloudSim. Running the simulations in the cloud ensures that the competitors' robots navigate completely autonomously throughout the competition courses, which must be kept secret. A competition run involves multiple cloud instances. One instance contains the infrastructure for the simulation, including the underground world, robot models, and sensors. The other instances execute the software for each of the competitors' robots. Teams can have multiple robots and attach different software to each robot. The team's robots receive sensor data from the simulator and send back commands to their robots. There's a firewall between the competitor software and the simulation to make sure the team's software solution can't get a peek at the world or the artifact locations except through its own sensors. Also, the team's robots can only talk to each other through the simulated communication model. The team's solution is run against multiple courses with different layouts, scales, and challenges. These virtual worlds contain obstacles, constrained passages, and vertical shafts. To win, the team's robots must autonomously explore each course and locate artifacts. The SubT Challenge Virtual Competition's Cloud Sim environment allows competitors to push the boundaries of autonomous navigation of complex underground domains.
Well, I called it the backbone, but Tim, I'm going to head on over to you. What is the impact of cloud-based simulation?
I think what's really exciting about being able to leverage cloud-based resources for the SubT Challenge has been to open up the aperture of who can come join and contribute to that innovation process. You no longer need racks of computers or access to significant supercomputers to be able to do these types of large-scale simulations that you really wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And now what this means is that we can seek to democratize where this innovation is happening.
So now that we're getting closer to the time, the big question is, should we take a look at our circuit leaderboard?
Yes.
Because there is not just something up at stake in terms of winning a DARPA challenge. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment in itself, but there's also prize money at stake. We've got DARPA-funded teams and self-funded teams. Tell us about it, Angela.
Right, so self-funded teams are actually competing for 3 prizes, and those are $250,000, $150,000, and $100,000 for the top 3 self-funded teams. And right now, if we look at the leaderboard, Sodium 24 and Robotica are really close, fighting for that 3rd self-funded monetary prize.
So something to keep our eyes on through the second half, right? All right, well, let's get it started. Let's take a look at World 5. This is uphill battle. And Angela, describe some of the elements here.
Yeah, so this world has a lot of constrained passages. There are areas that you can only find artifacts if you pass through those constrained passages. There's also a few large cavern tiles that we'll have to see how teams explore them efficiently and actually search for artifacts in those. It's not just about navigation. They also need to search for the artifacts without spending too much or too little time in those caverns.
And you again can see the expanse, just the growth of these networks. Incredible view from the flyover. So now let's get into it. Let's see our dashboard. Again, these are played back all at the same time. We can manipulate them however we'd like in terms of showing you which ones. So here's your 16 teams. Let's see who's up first. And it looks like Team Robotica will be up first. And you can see the staging area at the bottom. And then that orange line is going to show us how far they've come till we get there. 5 active robots. This one is Freya working through. We've already seen this system work once before. About 7 minutes into the run, what are you seeing?
Yeah, they're traveling pretty quickly through this area, and you see a backpack they're approaching there, and they're definitely able to enter this really tight passage with their small UGV. And there they go. They identified that backpack, meaning they still are in communication range thanks to all of the breadcrumbs that they've deployed at this point.
So working back through those breadcrumbs, still going, scored up now to 3. We have 8 attempts on the board, and you can start to see them working down that corridor. One of the interesting things too is we talk about robots and we use the word agility, Tim. Mm-hmm. What exactly does that mean in reference to systems?
Yeah, well, for these types of systems to be demonstrating agility, what we are looking for is their ability to understand the world around them and then navigate around those hazards that would otherwise disable them. So being able to be not so quick on their feet per se, quick on their wheels or propellers, but the ability for them to understand their local surroundings and respond to anything that might come their way.
What are some other potentials, like vitals, we'll call them? So we've got endurance, we've got agility, speed. What are some other elements to systems that we might be able to find?
The sensor range is really important. So how far can their sensors see? the resolution of the sensors, especially LiDAR sensors, where you may miss an obstacle if your resolution is not high enough to be able to detect something like a small stalagmite that's sticking up out of the ground.
And just as you finish, another artifact has been detected. So 2 artifacts in what's just about under 2 minutes of simulated time. That's pretty quick. Team Robotica is doing some work. Let's see what else is happening on our dashboard. Uphill battle again. This is World 5, Flying Fitches, a team we have yet to see. Let's take a look at what they're doing. Looks like a little bit of a slide there. I'm not exactly sure. What are you seeing?
Yeah, their UGV is starting to traverse the main straight passage here. They haven't yet reached any of the really constrained passages, and they're kind of trying to follow the left wall, and they're struggling a little bit with all of these rocks that are jutting out from that wall. It makes it really difficult in these cave environments to do wall following when the walls are so jagged and irregular due to them being formed naturally.
So they've got 3 attempts in. We'll see. They're sticking, you said the left wall, they're sticking pretty close to it. Not moving at that great of a pace. A little bit steadier. You can see again, great point. But are they going to find something? It looks like there is a survivor artifact in the corner. They're getting closer, working over the loose rock beneath. Turn back around. Let's see if they get it dialed up.
Yeah, they're very lucky they did not get stuck on those rocks right there, because I have seen it happen, especially with the X1 UGV. It tends to get stuck on these rocks. It doesn't have the tracked mobility.
And there it is. You just saw it come up in the bottom of your screen. The score has now been updated. They now have 1 point in this world, just 12 minutes into the run. You can see them going down that long tunnel. Here's a look at Flying Fitches. This is your first chance to see them. They are led by Wolfgang Schwab. They are out of Germany, a team of 4, and they have quite a few systems. They've got the X2, X1, and X4. They said they've had a lot of experience. They're a bunch of engineers solving problems, and they're totally new to robotics. I think that's wild. All of a sudden you can just come in. That's amazing. And we're moving on to Columbula. They are making it down to that first long corridor. This is their UAV. And Tim, one of the interesting things, they talked about it in their interview, which of course you can find online. They said that they have systems, they're communicating with one another, but they're also building what's called a mini map. So it'd be almost like when you're passing by someone and it's giving you directions. Hey, go down this street and turn right or left. Can you describe that type of a strategy?
Yeah, one of the main things that they're focused on is the limited communications. And so what's the lowest amount of information that they can share to their teammates so that they can still make good use of that? And so this annotated graph that they're able to represent is a lightweight way that they can quickly share with their teammates, hey, this is what I think I've seen or found along the way.
And it feels like that's got a real world application to it for sure, because you're sitting there and like, oh, I can understand that, right, left. So all these systems communicating back and forth with one another. Angela, are you seeing anything?
Yeah, I'm hoping they just approached a phone artifact there, and it's really difficult to see. And I'm hoping they can try to communicate that back. But actually, I'm looking ahead, and it looks like they are not able to detect that really small phone. And this kind of identifies the difficulty of artifact detection using just a camera. So they're really trying to detect the artifacts in these really diverse environments, but you see they're using up some of their attempts there, and they're actually right now reporting several artifacts near the staging area where their other robots are. And it looks like they're having some false detections there, but they're still not able to identify the phone. So they might need to do some more tuning on their artifact detector.
Well, that's something they'll have to look through as we head to Team Dynamo. Again, this team is led by Hilario Tomei, and you can see the depth at which they've gotten into this cave network. Haven't quite made it to that left side. And wow, what an expansive cavern. I mean, this has got to be one of the biggest ones we've seen so far.
Right, yeah, they're trying to explore this vertical space by circling it at the moment. Dynamo's solution actually builds out a map at multiple different resolutions. Oh, they just scored an artifact there. And they are trying to build it at multiple resolutions so that they can build exploration spaces of these large areas with a smaller resolution than the more constrained areas, so they can try to explore both and spend time in both of those types of environments, trying to look for the artifacts in those without exploring the cavern for too long.
So Tim, can you speak to, because it sounds like you're kind of talking about the idea of efficiency, right? So like you're exploring these and also navigating these large caverns, trying to figure out where these artifacts are. How important is the idea of efficiency in something like this?
It's absolutely critical, especially when you're on the clock and you have limited battery endurance. You need to be able to look wide so that you can understand your bearings, but you also have to neck in and zero in so that you can clearly identify and position where those artifacts are located.
Efficiency is key as two ships passing in the night, two UAVs just crossed paths. Again, this is Team Dynamo. They have a 9 points scored in this world. That is uphill battle, and coordinated robotics is up next. Let's see how far they have gotten in. We're going to start again with their HD2 system, and I believe that is a survivor artifact just on the right side.
Yeah, they're approaching the survivor artifact, and also we'll see them approach the cavern coming up, and that's going to be really interesting because their UGV is going to approach the edge of this cavern. I don't want to telegraph too much, but
not too much foresight, just enough.
The UGV cannot successfully explore that cavern. They really need to send a UAV in to explore that large vertical space.
So this is fun. Now, you guys, you've heard from Angela, you know what to look for as we're watching this UGV kind of trek through. Let's see if they find that edge. I feel like we should have some really intense suspense music right now. There's a breadcrumb dropped.
Yeah, they're going to continue on for quite a bit in here before reaching the edge. You can see there's an artifact up by the edge of that cavern as well. That's a phone. So maybe they'll be able to detect that phone as well while they're in that area.
And then, Angela, can you describe, while we're waiting for that edge, can you describe with these track systems in the virtual world, I believe you said they actually are made up of more wheels than anything else. How does the two kind of, relate?
Right, it's kind of an approximation of a tracked vehicle plug-in, what we would call, in the simulator. So right now it's kind of approximated by a set of wheels, which still gives you better traversability than just having 4 wheels on a platform, but it doesn't quite give you the same friction parameters that having actual tracks will. So that's one of the improvements we plan to make to the simulator, to try to give vehicles like this that have better traversability in the real environment a chance to really shine.
Well, I hope they're shining light on that cliff edge right there, because I think we have officially found it.
Yes, we have, and their robot
oh my!
should be able to see that negative obstacle. It does have downward tilted RGBD cameras. You see the phone as well.
Right there.
So is it going to see that as well, though?
Yeah, so let's see. They seem to be trying to enter that cavern. I think what might be happening here is kind of a conflict between their local planner and their global planner. So their local planner recognizes that there's a negative obstacle there that their robot cannot traverse, but I can tell you that that does not end well, and their robot does end up at the bottom of that cavern.
Uh-oh, well, hopefully Team Andersons can do, or at least avoid that same spot. All right, let's take a look at Team Andersons in uphill battle. Well, they would be able to get through it, I think, a little better with a UAV, which is what we're seeing now on screen. They've got 4 points, and is that the exact same spot?
Yeah, it is.
Perfect.
Actually, no. They're a little bit deeper in.
Okay.
This is the second cavern. So they've already traversed that other cavern that we were just in.
Now, I mean, just from my perspective, I'm looking at this, and Tim, maybe you can speak to this. We watched a UAV kind of circle a large cavern while it's dropping down, right? This one just dropped straight down and went right into the tunnel. What's the difference there?
Yeah, it all boils down to what kind of behavior they're going for. If one of the, well, there they go, passing
Right.
the night right
Yep.
there.
Again.
And you know, if they're trying to penetrate deep into this cavern just for the sake of exploration, well, then you're going to optimize for speed rather than sensor coverage. Whereas if you're otherwise trying to find and map all of the surfaces so that you might be able to find those lone artifacts out there, then you might be doing that spin maneuver.
One of the things I've heard so many team leads talk about is priorities, right? All these teams, and that goes to speak to strategies, their priorities are different. So what are some of this team's priorities?
I mean, what it looks like they're interested in is doing that broader exploration.
Okay.
You know, we know that Team Anderson's is interested in using their systems to be able to cover as much as they can and learn as much as they can so they can make the best use of that information. I think all different sorts of strategies apply, and it really depends on what you bring to the competition.
No doubt.
Yeah, this team actually has different strategies for different robots as well. So I think what we're watching right now is one of their robots that's designated to go quickly through the environment and go really deep as quickly as possible. They also have robots that will follow behind and try to explore more thoroughly the environment with a slower speed.
So speed is key at the start for Team Anderson's. Now, this is a team out of the United States. And when I say it's a team, there's only one member. However, he has 8 kids and they all help him out. The team lead is Adam Anderson. He's a professor and scientist. And he said he's been teaching his kids to code since a super young age. So Team Anderson's, you gotta guarantee they're all tuning in. Next up, CTU Krasnorlab. Looks like they've made it down that left area, that left corridor. Moving in pretty deep here, just 16 minutes remaining. Remember that time clock, 60 total minutes for each of these teams. DS1 heading up in a cavern.
This is one of the areas in uphill battle where teams can explore vertically in these large spaces. So there's definitely some vertical shafts here that are large enough that it's kind of difficult to find an artifact there. So the team will really have to use all of the cameras available on board this DS1 robot, the upward facing, downward facing, and forward facing, to be able to see these artifacts.
And Tim, this is CTU Krasnorlab's first time in the virtual competition. What have you been impressed with? You've seen them in systems as well. What have you been impressed with by them?
Well, I think the idea that they can go and take another team's robot, that, you know, a fellow competitor in the systems competition, and identify that DS1 platform, which is from Team Explorer, and be able to incorporate it into their algorithms, highlights the fact that their algorithms might be able to port to different platforms, and I think that's a really cool thing.
When we talk about the DS1, let's take a look at the DS1. You get a little bit of a deeper view into it. And Angela, one of the things you mentioned, which I would love for you to describe a little bit more, is the Marsupial Factor. Now, there haven't been any used in the virtual competition, but what exactly is that and how can it be utilized?
Right, so the marsupial vehicles are when you have a UGV that's capable of carrying a UAV on its back into the environment, and teams can really use that to go deep in, as far as their UGVs can go, identify a vertical frontier, and then deploy a UAV from the back of their UGV to explore that area without using all of the UAV's battery life in the process of getting there.
Totally makes sense. And we're moving to map quickly. We're just moving quick. It's just going. All right, just 2 minutes left. They have scored 4 points. 4 total attempts made. Are you a little surprised by that at all in terms of, at this point in a run, this late in a run, to have only used 4?
No, actually, Map Quickly is doing a really good job here. They actually, looking ahead, identify 5 of the 7 artifacts that their robot passes, and they do not use any attempts without scoring. So
Wow.
they score all 5 of the attempts that they use.
So efficiency in a different factor.
Right. So one thing that I think they're going to struggle with, though, is with this single X2 robot, they can only go so deep into the environment before they're going to lose communication. So I think what's happening right now is the UGV is trying to get back into communications range so it can report the artifacts that it's found by going deep into the environment. But since they only have one robot and they're not deploying any of the communication nodes, see, they just scored that artifact after traveling close enough to the staging area, they're not going to be able to go deep into the environment and continue reporting artifacts as they do. They're going to have to come all the way back and report.
That's a great call. Perfect. Well, let's take a look at map quickly. You saw the one active robot because you mentioned it. They have one system, and that is the X2. This team is led by Stephen Gray. And let's take a look now because I believe that brings us all the way to the end of World 5, Uphill Battle. So now you can see how teams shaped up in this world alone. 26 and 26, a tie from Robotica and Coordinated Robotics. Nice run by Coordinated Robotics, though, with a high score of 11 on their best run. Angela, what happened?
Yeah, I want to make note of that. Coordinated Robotics was actually able to explore both the giant caverns in this world and the constrained passages. They reached 18 of the 20 artifacts
Wow.
in the world. Unfortunately, due to their X3's really small field of view, they were not able to actually detect and score all of those artifacts, but the fact that they reached them means they covered the vast majority of this world.
That's really, really impressive, but that's why those comm systems, I guess, are just that much more important. So now let's take a look at the Cave Circuit leaderboard. So now we are 5 worlds in. You can see Coordinated Robotics and Team Barks have switched positions. Keep your eye out on some of those teams up there. And on the second half, let's see who's moved around. We still have 4 teams in that 13th place spot. Let's see. Oh, that's the only move. We've got one from Columbia. Just moving down, just a few. All right, well, I mentioned it. We have, 3 worlds left? And we're going to fly through a couple. So the first one we're going to fly through, let's move on to World 6. Angela, tell me a little bit about the high road.
This world is enormous. It is 5.2 kilometers of traversable length. It's mainly built with one really large loop. It gets out to 880 meters away from the staging area on the far end of that loop. So teams will really have to explore deep into this environment and get out of comms range. The breadcrumbs will not be able to save them here.
And Tim, she mentioned a loop. What are some of the challenges that are, I guess, are surrounding a loop in a cave network like this?
Yeah, so what robots love to do is visit a place and then try to visit it again just so they can correct and update their localization.
Okay.
And so the more times they can do that, the better they can get a fix. Now with a large loop like this, they probably won't have an opportunity to come back on that original position to really close that loop. If they do, then they'll have to do that kind of on a long trail here.
I gotcha. Understood. All right. Well, we don't see necessarily World 6, but we will give you an update on where teams stand in terms of scoring points on World 6. So here's Coordinated Robotics up at the top, 13 total scores. It's really interesting to me to see how many scores kind of vary from world to world. Some with, a total of 38, and now highest score is 13.
Right, a lot of the artifacts in this world are placed really far from the staging area, and teams had to go deep to find them. So I think they're struggling with that here. Another thing, Coordinated Robotics was able to travel 3 kilometers with their HD2 robot.
Wow.
And Freya by Robotica also traveled 4 kilometers, which is the most of any single robot in any run.
Very
so that's
impressive.
Very impressive. And Barks was also able to travel 800 meters from the staging area with their X1 UGV. So it looks like they did get almost to the other side of that loop, but maybe they weren't able to make it back.
And of course, as you're speaking, we're starting to see the cave circuit leaderboard. So now we've added in World 6. Guys, we're getting closer, and remind you, there is some prize money. We've got the glory of winning a DARPA challenge all on the line as you take a look at the second half. So as we get down to World 7 and 8, who is going to end up atop the leaderboard, and how much can they change their position? Even if they're in the second half, where are they going to end up? So much fun to watch. All right, should we move on? Next world? All right, let's take a look at our next world. World 7, just 2 to go. This is called Triple Decker. And if you take a look at the vitals on the bottom, verticality, it's pretty intense, and so is path complexity. Tell me more.
Right, definitely. So this is actually one of the worlds that teams have been practicing on for months. We did tell them that we were going to choose one of the practice worlds to use as a competition world, but all of the artifacts have been moved in this case. So they will have to search for the artifacts again, but they've been practicing on this world for a while, so I really hope that they can do better here with the verticality in this world. The other thing to note is there are multiple paths to get to the different vertical spaces in this world. You could use a UGV and try to go around and use inclines and declines to get there, rather than just traversing the vertical shafts with your UAVs.
Now, Tim, what would be your strategy if you were to approach this world? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. I think, honestly, just like Angela said, I think understanding that the ground robots can do what they do well, which is traverse longer distances. I think I would have made use of those marsupials, knowing that I want to get the best of both worlds and tie them in a single package. So I think if I could get in deep and still take advantage of my UAVs to do the verticals, that's perhaps how I would have taken
That's the direction you
it.
would have gone? I like it. All right, well, should we see how teams shaped up after World 7 Triple Decker? Here's a look at how they performed. And again, just huge variance in terms of from the last world to this world. 33 for coordinated robotics. I mean, how did these teams shape up?
Yeah, teams have performed pretty well on this world. It's actually fairly comparable to how they scored in practice runs, which were run on Cloud Sim leading up to this competition. And coordinated robotics, I want to say, I don't know if anyone noticed the helmet artifact that was hanging way up in the vertical spire. That's 130 meters high. They were able to score that artifact with their X3 robot.
130 meters high. Wow, that's incredible. As you take a look at the second half, and then we're gonna move on to how the teams now are after 7 worlds. Guys, we've got one more world left, so these totals, there's some differential coordinated robotics and team barks. You can see the difference there. Dynamo, Robotica, I feel like there's a lot of teams within striking distance, so keep an eye out as we go through that final world. Flying Fitches has done a nice job. They're up to 35 points. And hey, great news, everybody has at least scored 3, so that's fantastic. Okay, should we set them up for the final? This is the last one, guys.
Bring it on.
Bring it on home. This one is called This World is Rock and a Hard Place. And again, Angela, wow, you really teed these up. Just keeping them challenging. Verticality, path complexity, again high, but 0 dynamic obstacles. Tell me about this world.
Yeah, this world is a bit of a surprise for teams in contrast to the last one. This world was created using an open data set of a scanned cave. So that's a real cave that someone went in and scanned using LiDAR technology, and we've actually built a mesh out of this world that we were able to use and run teams through it.
So as we see, again, here's your 16 simulations, all getting played back at the same time. Can you tell me a little bit about the cave that this was modeled after as we start to see a team maybe come up with an event here?
Yeah, this cave has a lot of different terrain in it, so that's one thing I'll be keeping an eye out for. It's also really organically shaped, and you can see these two large caverns right in the center, as well as the constrained passages on the side.
And you can see it right there, perfect. So Sodium 24 Robotics will be up first, and you can see those 2 large caverns you were just discussing. Great job, Angela. So let's take a look at where they're at. It looks like it's a minute into their run, or just under, using one of those UGVs. Again, this is Sodium 24 Robotics. They've got 8 systems on their roster, half UGVs, half aerials. They have competed in each of our virtual competitions at each of our circuits. What should we be looking for?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
One of the first things here is, it's right tight, narrow corridor, but just hold your breath. It's going to open up into this massively open cavern. And I think that's part of that dichotomy that we were interested in, the diversity of these environments, both from a sensor range, both from what you can reach with your platforms. I think that's, just the sense of scale here is pretty cool to see.
And Angela, you've done a phenomenal job, and maybe I'm going to tee you up a little bit too aggressively here, but can you talk, a little bit about the expanse, as I believe we're about to approach an artifact on the left side.
Yeah, there's a backpack over there, and okay, so the distance from the staging area to around the back of that second cavern is around 250 meters.
Okay.
So if a team were to take a straight line distance, which obviously they can't, then they would be able to travel in 250 meters. But they really need to explore everything around them in those large caverns rather than just moving straight through.
Understood. And you can see this UGV is exploring. They've dropped a couple breadcrumbs as they've gone along. So we've seen 2 attempts. Are they circling back because they've identified, located an artifact and are now trying to search for more, or are they just trying to send in different reports?
I think they're still searching, and I don't think they're out of communication range yet. They're still able to attempt, but they might just be trying to search around for other artifacts in this large area. Again, it's really difficult to coordinate an entirely autonomous team to explore these vast spaces like this.
Well, it's going to continue through, it looks like, to a narrowing path. Oh, and perfect. Artifact detected right at the same time, moving at about 1 meter, sometimes getting closer to that 2 meters per second. And that looks like a pretty aggressive cliff edge there, or crevasse.
Yeah, they're approaching pretty quickly with that X2.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
No, and they're gone.
Yeah, I think they were moving really quickly down there. If we can take a look at Sodium-24 Robotics, that X2 platform can move really quickly but doesn't have the same sensor field of view as some of the other robots, so it wasn't able to actually see that decline where it could have otherwise avoided entering that crevasse.
Understood. Well, let's see if other teams can avoid that crevasse. We've got Coordinated Robotics coming up. And I believe they're using, again, there's the HD2. Start to see some of those low-hanging. Dropping a breadcrumb next up.
Yeah, they're trying to enter that constrained area, but there's nowhere to go with a UGV in that spot. They really need to send in a UAV, which is even more difficult to send into the constrained spots because you have to consider obstacles in all 3 directions.
So found that dead end, and now they're going to turn back around. So this is still that same area, correct, that we just saw in our last event?
Yeah, we're really close by to where Sodium-24's X2 fell in.
Okay.
So we'll have to see. HD2 does have a downward pointed depth camera that they can use to see drop-offs, but like we saw in Uphill Battle, their local planner has to take that into account, and their global planner also has to take that into account and be able to say if their robot can traverse that area or not, or if it's at risk of falling into the crevasse.
And talking about risks of falling in, is it going to happen as another UGV passes by? Uh-oh. And
it's trying hard.
It's trying to stay upright. And we've even found another cliff edge. That's pretty impressive. The real question, do you think it's going to get back out?
Nope, definitely cannot get out of there. Even with the tracked platform, no one can drive up that incline, so they're really going to have to rely on their UAVs here because they've really struggled to identify that rough terrain.
And again, Coordinated Robotics, one of the teams at near the top of the leaderboard, so pay attention to that. Dynamo is up next. Looks like they've gone into that second cavern on the back end. This is, again, rock and a hard place. Our final world. We've got 5 active robots, a UAV in sight, 8 total attempts, and already 5 points on the board. That's incredible with just 55 minutes still left to go.
Yeah, they've scored 5 points in 5 minutes, which means they're really doing a good job of spreading out their UAVs and trying to explore especially the vertical spaces in this large cavern tile.
And Tim, I know I've asked you about it before, but in terms of strategy, when you're sending out all systems at once, especially with these UAVs, I mean, can you describe how they're communicating and moving around and being able to identify these artifacts?
Yeah, so Team Dynamo in particular is making use of trying to maximize their information gain and doing that in a coordinated way, which means how can I spread out all of my robots so I can increase how quickly I get new information. That strategy seems to be working really well for them here in these larger crevasses or larger cavernous areas, so that they can zero in on what the map looks like so they can go and localize these artifacts.
So from my perspective, I'm sitting here as they score another 2 artifacts in just the last few seconds. I'm sitting here going, if you've got multiple robots in the same area, are they just picking up the same thing? Shouldn't you want them exploring other areas? But sometimes it's kind of helpful because you're getting multiple views. Is that true, or how does that function?
I think sometimes you can get the benefit of getting multiple looks at artifacts. You might be able to refine and even get a better estimate of their location. In this particular case, I think Dynamo's done a good job of really thinking about how to spread them all across the course so that they can cover as much as they possibly can.
All right, Team Barks. Again, guys, Barks was near the top of the leaderboard. This is our last world. Let's see what they can put together. Team Barks. 6 minutes in, they've already scored 2. They are also utilizing their UAVs. You see a breadcrumb just beneath it. Scanning left to right. And Angela, let's see, are they going to fly straight through that small canal, or are they going to do something else?
Yeah, I think they're going to try to explore vertically here. So Barks has this strategy where they're trying to fill the volume of these large areas with spheres and use that to try to coordinate which areas to explore. So you see their UAV is going low altitude, high altitude. They just scored a backpack that you could barely see in that video, but clearly their robot caught it. So they're really able to explore those vertical areas even in this large tile. And we'll see that with them spreading out their UAVs as they go through as well.
So searching low, searching high, and another artifact identified. Was that the backpack on that left side? I'm thinking it might have been.
Yep.
Awesome. So now they're going to continue down the path so quick, just within 7 minutes. Again, very impressive. 4 points already scored and within 4 attempts. So high efficiency from Team Barks. 3 active robots throughout World 8 so far. Be interesting to see if they can find some big points in this last world. And I believe that they're going to find another maybe UGV on the left side. As we get into our next team, Team Dynamo. And that orange is starting to really light up. It looks like they've searched really well that first open cavern. Let's take a deeper look at Team Dynamo and where they're at. Again, wow, I love this view. Being able to come into a cavern, you see 3 UAVs all in the same place at the same time.
Right, they're exploring on multiple levels. So you see that drone all the way at the bottom, trying to scan for artifacts on the floor. You see this drone, which was starting up all the way at the top of the cavern and now descending to get a better look. So they're definitely dispersing their UAVs. Even when it looks like they're exploring the same area, they're at multiple different levels so they can see the artifacts that might be hanging on the wall, for example.
Got it. Now, one of the interesting things for Team Dynamo, they talked about some of their inspiration, and they said they've taken inspiration from humanoids, but they also love the fact that quadcopters have so much more freedom. Can you speak to the freedom that they're describing?
Yeah, the quadcopters have really changed how we think about these types of aerial vehicles. Gives you a lot more control to be able to position them where you want, steer the cameras in the direction you want, and I think that's led to a lot of breakthroughs in how we think about flights and aerial robots.
And one of the things they also described was saying, humanoids are obviously very expensive to create, and quadcopters or aerial vehicles, they're on the lesser end. So I think that one of the big parts of this is DARPA is not just about creating new developments, but it's also about finding cost efficiency. Can you describe that?
I think one of the places where DARPA is always looking for breakthroughs is to not only advance the capabilities that haven't yet to be discovered, but also to accelerate the ability to use technologies in novel ways. And I think DARPA is interested in finding those types of solutions.
You bet. As we head on over, we've got Team Andersons. Let's see what they're up to. So UAV. Oh, it looks like it got hit and it was able to recover.
Yeah, it clipped that little constrained passage there, so they're trying to enter, but maybe they're not able to see all of the obstacles around them at the moment. Their solution tries to essentially add little Pac-Man dots as they go through, and maybe their robot has identified a frontier in there, but is unable to traverse that area and avoid the obstacles. So they're unable to enter that new constrained passage on the side that actually no team has been able to enter that passage.
Really? So what's interesting is while you were just talking, an artifact point had come up. Was that something that this system had found, or maybe was it somewhere else?
Yeah, I think it was somewhere else.
Okay.
They've got quite a few UAVs exploring. I think this is one of their slower UAVs that's trying to be thorough and search every little section of this really cluttered environment. And they have other UAVs as well as a UGV spinning over there, trying to search for some of the artifacts more quickly.
Now, one of the things we talked about at the beginning of our show was how many different configurations that these systems could have, and there's a plethora. So what are some of those different configurations? I mean, I'm sure there's the sensors and all that, but I know that's probably a really loaded question.
Yeah, there's different sensor configurations, so you can have different numbers of cameras, different 3D or 2D LiDARs if you're only interested in scanning a section of the environment. Or if you're interested in getting 3D information. There's the breadcrumbs, obviously, but yeah, there's a lot to get into.
There's a lot you could get into. Well, let's get into Sodium-24 Robotics. See where they have found themselves. Traveling at about 1 meter per second. You can see a UGV beneath.
Yeah, that's one of the UGVs we saw get stuck earlier, and you see another one has gotten stuck in that crevasse over there.
And this is the area we also saw coordinated robotics.
Right.
Tracked vehicles also slip off, correct?
Yep.
So now we're starting to see a UAV, and is that another UAV kind of on the ground there beneath it? I wonder if there was one prior. Maybe we'll see if it comes back.
Yeah, it looks like it was a downed X4 down there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible they clipped that area and fell earlier on in their run with a different robot, but this one's actually able to enter that constrained area really well, and it hasn't clipped at all. And you see how close it is to hitting the walls in this spot, and that's really impressive because that is, I believe, less than a half a meter gap there.
Oh my goodness, so tiny. Just to give you guys some perspective back at home. And I feel like that's very relative to potentially the systems competition as well, Tim, because there are certain constrained passages about relatively the same size.
Yeah, and that's by design. Again, the systems competition, we're interested in pushing these real-world robots in real-world environments, and there are those narrow passageways. So we've created that synthetically here in our virtual environments to stress test the algorithms as well.
Stress test, nice, I like that. All right, so they've got 5 on the board. They've used up 32 of their attempts. They still have 30 minutes to go, though. I wonder what Sodium-24 Robotics will be able to finish up with in World 8. And now it's time to go back to Team Barks. We saw them not long ago. Let's see where they've gotten to now. Rock in a hard place. This is World 8, our final world. Now they have 8 points on the board. They've still only used 10 of their attempts. They've got 23 minutes left. We're very curious to see how they finish out. Angela, what are you looking at?
Yeah, they've identified at this point 8 of the 10 artifacts that are available in these 2 large cavernous areas. So in order to find more artifacts, they really need to enter these offshoots that you see that look really difficult to pass through, and they are. There's a lot of clutter. I actually attempted to fly a robot through by teleoperation in this world. It is really hard. I could not get them through just by visually looking. You really need those 3D LiDAR sensors to be able to map as you're going and identify the new frontiers in these cluttered areas.
I really like that you mentioned that too, because it shows what technology can do for you beyond what we're even capable of. It's really impressive. All right, well, we mentioned it. We're getting really close to the end. This is World 8. As Barks continues to scan, they've got 3 active robots, 8 total points. We had a lot of teams up at the top of the leaderboard. We were wondering what in the world, how are they gonna finish? So let's take a look at our leaderboard. Now this is just for World A, and you all are wanting to know who's ended up winning. Well, you're gonna have to hang out and wait, because here's the totals just for this world alone. 24 points for Barks, Dynamo 21. Where's Coordinated Robotics? There they are. They got 8 points. So I'm sure you all are scurrying to do the math, but for those who aren't, stick around because we got more coming. Let's take a look at the second half of our world leaderboard. And US SEDS picked up 3 points in this world map quickly, 3 as well. And Columbula ended up with 7, best run of 3. And now, Tim and Angela, I would love to get your final thoughts on what we've seen now that we've finished all 8 worlds. Angela, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so we've seen teams conquer these cave environments by dispersing their multi-robot teams throughout and really deep into these huge cave terrains. And they've also handled dynamic obstacles, which has been new to this circuit, and replanned based on how their environment's changing. We've seen them handle communications degradation by deploying communication networks as they go through. And we've also seen them exploring these complex paths that are really different in every single world, and we saw different teams come out on top in the different worlds.
And Tim, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the really exciting things about what we've seen today is that there's this convergence between what's happening in the real world and what's happening in the virtual worlds. So the systems competition and the virtual competition keep getting closer and closer, which means that the lessons that we learn in the virtual domain will hopefully impact positively in the physical domain. I think what we've seen here today, we've had teams that have only focused on the systems now coming into virtual as crossover teams. We are seeing robots that roamed mines and tunnels and now coming in to study in the virtual domain for caves. And we even saw in World 8 taking a real world cave data set and turning that and transforming it into a virtual test ground. So I think that convergence, I think, it will dramatically accelerate how we can discover these innovations and translate them to real world practice.
And I want to finish out again, Tim, one more question for you is, what is the importance of the DARPA Subterranean Challenge? And I know you touched on it, the real world applications, but I really want you to dive into that a little bit more.
Absolutely. I think really this is coming back to DARPA's mission to discover breakthrough technologies for national security and really speaking to what SubT Challenge is all about, which is to revolutionize how we operate in underground domains. What that means at the end of the day is that these technologies will hopefully be able to allow for us to respond to emergency situations or send in our warfighters without putting them in harm's way. We'll send in these robots first. Mm-hmm. They will be able to identify all of that situational awareness that we need prior to sending folks into harm's way, and I really think that's the type of impact that we can look forward to throughout the SubT Challenge.
Well, speaking of first responders and sending people into some dangerous situations, I actually got a chance to catch up with a SubT Challenge stakeholder. This is Anmar Mirza. Take a look. All right, hello, Anmar. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and where you're coming from?
Sure. I'm the National Coordinator for the National Cave Rescue Commission. That's a volunteer position that I've held for the last 11 years. I also teach an emergency medical technician class at Indiana University, and I'm an adjunct professor at Ivy Tech Technical College in Indiana.
And this is Anmar Mirza tuning in to give us some insight, because I know you've worked with the National Cave Rescue Commission and you're the national coordinator. So can you give us a little bit of insight as to what systems like what's happening in the cave circuit, how those can be developed and help you in your work.
So a lot of what we're looking at with cave rescue is communications is probably our biggest bottleneck when we have a major cave rescue. We can usually throw bodies at the problem. Accessing the patient can sometimes be a challenge, but usually that's not the issue. Management of a larger operation, though, especially when you're strung out over thousands and thousands of feet of cave passage, and trying to coordinate all the various teams that are associated with that is probably our biggest single challenge. There are occasionally times where we would like to have the ability to do remote sensing if somebody is behind a collapsed section of cave, or they're just in an extremely tight section of cave that you can't fit more than just the person who is in trouble with. But as far as the cave circuit goes, the challenges that the robotics might face are substantial, as you can imagine.
So can you tell us a story where, one of the systems that's being developed may have been able to help?
So we had a person in a cave in Utah who was trapped in a very tight passage in a head-down configuration, but only very small cavers could get to them, and the small cavers could only access his feet. He ended up perishing in that cave. If we could have gotten something to the other side of him to potentially help with rigging systems to get him out, or to find out if there were other areas that we could send people around, that may have been helpful.
What are some of the technologies that you've seen used already that you would love to see developed even further?
So of course, with cave communications, typical radio signals do not penetrate rock very well. So virtually all of our communications are either messengers carrying notes, or they're wired field telephones, quite literally 100-plus-year-old technology. We use surplus military field phones for most of our communications, which ties us to the wire. What we would really like to see with that is something that would enable us to have the personnel who are going into the cave not be tied to that wire. So we've experimented with the mesh-style communications, with store and forward text-based communications, but those have significant limitations. And of course, in cave, your radio signals are limited to line of sight. So when you're talking being a couple of miles into a cave, having to have multiple repeater nodes becomes cumbersome.
Well, hopefully these technologies that we're developing here can help you leading into the future. Anmar, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
You're welcome.
Well, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Who in the world has won DARPA Subterranean Challenge? The cave circuit. But before we get into that, we've also made up some Superlative Awards. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with you, and Angela's going to walk us through. Our very first one is Most Accurate Artifact, going to Map Quickly.
This award goes to the team who really showed off their mapping and artifact localization algorithms by reporting the artifact with the closest error across all of the runs. So this team identified a phone artifact within 2.5 centimeters of its actual location, and that is really close.
That is really, really close. Well, it's time to head to our second Superlative Award, and probably my favorite. It's got a great name. Let's check it out. It's Dynamic Dodger. And who does it go to? Coordinated Robotics. Tell us, what does this award mean?
Right, Coordinated Robotics triggered the largest number of rock falls in a single run. That's 17 rock falls, and they've had to move around these dynamic obstacles and really explore a vast amount of this environment to get to all of these dynamic obstacle locations.
That's a lot of rock falls, my goodness. All right, number 3 is going to be Practice Makes Perfect. And the real question, who is the winner? Sodium 24 Robotics. Explain this one.
Yeah, Sodium 24 actually had the biggest difference between their best practice run on this world and the competition run on this world. So you can see their X2 robot in a practice run actually flips into this vertical cavern, but in their competition run, they're able to send a UAV to this area and explore vertically and score twice the number of points in their competition run.
So practice really does make perfect. My goodness. All right, time for number 4. It is Reality to Virtual Award. And it's going to go to NUS SEDS. Dive in.
Yeah, we want to highlight the team who used the largest number of robots from the systems competition that were modeled in the SubT tech repo. So this team used 2 Husky robots and 1 QAV 500 robot from Team Marble in the systems competition. And we really like the idea that now Team NUS SEDS software that works in the virtual realm on these robots could be transitioned into the real world and vice versa. So we can really start to merge the systems and virtual together.
That's the whole mission of the Subterranean Challenge, right? And now the big question remains, who has won? So for that, I'm going to hand it on over to Tim.
Thanks, Cameron. First off, let me congratulate all of the virtual competitors on a fantastic job. It's evident from the creativity that you exhibited in your solutions that there was a lot of work that went into these, and your contributions are greatly appreciated. Without further ado, let me introduce the winners of the SubT Challenge Cave Circuit Virtual Competition. In third place overall, we have Team Dynamo. Congratulations, Team Dynamo, and welcome to the SubT Challenge community. In second place, we have Team Barks. Thank you for your continued strong performance from the prior circuits till now. And finally, our top place winner in the Cave Circuit Virtual Competition is Coordinated Robotics. Thank you so much for your innovations and your contributions to the SubT Challenge. We now have the prize awards that I can award. The $100,000 prize goes to Team Robotica. Congratulations on your efforts, and we really appreciate your contributions to the SubT tech repo. For the $150,000 prize, congratulations to Team Dynamo. Fantastic showing in your first appearance here at the SubT Challenge. Welcome aboard. And finally, the $250,000 prize goes to, of course, Team Coordinated Robotics. Great job, and congratulations again, and congratulations to all of you who contributed to the virtual competition. Thank you. Over to you, Cam.
And thanks so much for joining us at home. We've had so much fun walking you through the virtual competition. However, would you like to know how all the rest of the teams finished up? Well, here's a look. Here's your leaderboard, so you can see, this is, I think, what's wild to me. Just a 3-point differential between first and second place. We knew it was going to come down to the wire before World 8. Team Barks scored so many points, but it just wasn't enough to get above Coordinated Robotics. And here's the second half. So again, congratulations to all 16 of our teams. And I want to have a huge thank you to the entire SubT Challenge team and our production crew for putting on this event. And of course, make sure you stay tuned for the next year, because guess what? We've got some fun stuff coming up. The final event will be in fall of 2021. You're not going to want to miss it.